to talk a little bit about really what is a critical issue. And really, this is a crisis issue impacting both families. This is a crisis impacting wage earners. And most importantly, this is a crisis issue that is impacting families that are just trying to go to the grocery store, children that are just trying to go to a toy store, citizens that are just trying to go to a bookstore in our community. And we have really lost control of the safety in protecting our families in New Mexico. And this is not an urban issue. This is a critical issue impacting cities, governments, and rural communities across the state of New Mexico. What I'm talking about here today is organized retail crime. And I'm telling you that we are leading the nation in rebuilding a model. But I'm also here as a critic that New Mexico has been asleep at the wheel for many years now in not updating our statutes and not properly funding the resources of this epidemic that has been growing now, not just for months, but for years. Organized retail crime is a problem in excess of $1 billion in losses every year in New Mexico. We lose lost wages, and more importantly, we are seeing an increase in violence. This is no longer an issue of teenagers shoplifting. Can we stop calling this crisis situation shoplifting? And the New Mexico legislature needs to understand that this is not an issue about protecting retail theft or store owners only. This is a public safety issue. These are organized retail criminals that are now realizing it is more profitable to steal from a Home Depot or a Lowe's or a small business owner than selling drugs or guns or running stolen cars in New Mexico. Am I clear to the general legislative and political community? It is more profitable now to go and steal from our local retailers than it is to sell drugs and guns in New Mexico. Organized retail criminals are at the very top of the food chain in terms of the level of violence and profiteering. It's important that lawmakers and politicians understand, and we all get on the same page, that we are not talking about teenagers shoplifting anymore. We are talking about law enforcement being overwhelmed, employees being overwhelmed, and we're talking about retailers being overwhelmed, and that the safety net no longer can protect families that are now going to a Home Depot. These parking lots are turning into crime scenes. Imagine that. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, at any point, any one of our retailers in the middle of broad daylight can turn into a crime scene. I'm frustrated because I have had the same tired conversation with the New Mexico legislature for now 7 years, that this organized retail crime bill is somehow put off as a minor reform, and this should be at the top of public safety reforms in the state of New Mexico. And I'm frustrated because on one hand, we have built a world-class model that is now leading the state of New Mexico, the country, in terms of how we do case management, how law enforcement is partnering with corporate, how corporate is partnering with small business, and those law enforcement partners are now prosecuting very difficult cases, and we're getting arrests and we're getting prison time. The problem is that the statutes and the other reforms have not caught up with good New Mexicans really just trying to make a better model, stronger and more safe. Our response times and our level of accountability is leading the nation. I'm getting calls from other state leaders in other states asking, how is New Mexico doing it? We are right now doing it without the legislature funding or partnering with us. And I'm pissed off about it. And the media and the general citizens need to be aware of where the failure has been. We have officers overwhelmed. We have minimum wage workers having guns wielded in their faces on a daily basis. And people are very frustrated. But I'm hoping this press conference will lead to real significant reforms in January. Number one, we need more agents across the state of New Mexico. And number two, the statutes have to reflect the nature of crime that is in the streets. That is my demand and my mandate here today. So in July of 2020 is when we changed the model. If we're not going to get help from the legislature with no funding or no law enforcement resources, we were going to duct tape a model that would lead the nation. And I'm here to announce another milestone. Here we have a database that our retailers are investing in, where we can now share information at a much more timely manner, and we're hoping to lead to more convictions and better prosecutions in our community. I will close with this, and I will turn it over to the mayor. This is a public safety strategy that New Mexico can never prosper until we get control of this issue. And we have a special guest here that we'll be closing with today. He is a survivor, and his employees are survivors. And it's the right tone which to end this press conference with, but we'll bring him up at the very end. But I'd like to bring up the mayor, and I hope I set the tone in terms of what we're going to talk about here today as a solution, but also set a tone of where we really need help. And that's a wholesale increase in resources, because we have the model, we just need the resources to invest. And Mayor, we'd like to have you say a few words. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Attorney General. And, you know, I want to begin with, unfortunately, what happened this morning in the Southeast at one of our most beloved restaurants. I think almost everyone is aware of Giovanni's and that the owner was shot and killed this morning. And APD is obviously going to share more information on this, as we always do. But I know from a mayor's perspective, you know, every life that's lost is, of course, very significant. But this is also a place that is beloved to so many in our community. And the family, the Zito family, also someone that many of us have known or have experienced throughout our lifetimes. And I remember my entire life going to Giovanni's. I go to church right across the street from there. And it obviously was part of my former state Senate district. And this situation, unfortunately, is connected to what our Attorney General said across a number of fronts. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of this individual, which did include shoplifting and retail theft. We're also going to talk about, you're going to hear about yet another example of a broken criminal justice system that could not keep this individual behind bars or appropriately under parole regulations. Time and time again, we see this. The Attorney General and I and others convened the Metro Crime Initiative last year to make this point to our community so that we each take part in our job to make our community safer, but we have to have help. Look at all the bills that failed, including the retail crime bill in the last session. We're going to do that again. This is a clarion call that we have to work on our criminal justice system at every level. This particular issue has its own background and history, but part of it is someone who probably should not have been on the streets at that moment with a gun. So why did that happen? There's all sorts of things behind it about our criminal justice system. And we have to use these examples as reasons for action. So clearly with the family, our condolences and our prayers and our grief is with them. We also appreciate that APD apprehended the shooter already. So there is hope for justice in this particular case. But we have to understand what led to this. And there's a whole lot of things behind it. But most of it is about a broken criminal justice system. And that is also behind this retail crime issue. Now, I think what the Attorney General has done has actually been extraordinary, given his lack of resources. We've tried to help at APD, and we understand that now, like he shared, we were both in the legislature, and we used to actually take a different stance with shoplifting, because the idea was these are folks who, you know, maybe they're in a low-income situation. Maybe their family's stressed. Maybe it's a teenager. It's never that in Albuquerque anymore, right? These are people who go in come out with boxes of drills. They wield weaponry on the way out if anyone tries to stop them. And then they get on our city buses, and then they go peddle it for drug money. That is organized crime. That is almost exactly the definition of organized crime. And so this is why this is such an important thing that we have to keep working on. Now, I do want to paint this in stark contrast to, I get a lot of this, well, California this, California that. We are not California. Our policies are not the same as in California, and our elected officials are different than California. We do not in any way reflect what is happening in California. we do reflect what is happening all across America, right? So there are specific issues out on the West Coast that are related but different. What we see here is happening all across the country, but as the Attorney General mentioned, we have not been equipped to deal with this, and that's what we're changing. So we have made some real progress, and I think that's also important. How many times do we hear, well, what's being done? Who's being arrested? Well, the answer is 100 people have been arrested under this program. With the Attorney General's help and the other partners involved in APD, we are trying to hold folks accountable. We just know this is a bigger problem. But we're not going to stop enforcement. We're not going to stop going after those people who do commit these crimes and holding them accountable. And that's what this partnership has enabled us to do. So I appreciate your leadership, Mr. Attorney General, and I know we're going to talk about the wonderful role that the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce is playing in this as well. But there is an opportunity, once again, for the community to help. If your camera does not talk to APD, and I mean this like in an IT sense, you have to get a different camera. That's just where we're at as a community, right? And we actually have ways to even help pay for that. We can help you with that process, but you know, the likelihood of us catching someone a month later with grainy video footage from your outdated camera, it's just not where America's at. So we're also trying to tell the truth. You've got to work with APD to get your cameras to tie into the Real-Time Crime Center. And that's a two-way street. And we've opened our end of the street with both money and IT services. But it's not enough anymore just to say, like, well, I have a camera. That obviously, you know, I wish it was, but we need a whole lot more, and that's what this is about. So with that, I'll hand it back to our Attorney General.
Great. I want to introduce our chief to say a few words.
Well, thank you everybody for being here this morning so we could talk about this important issue. And I want to build a little bit off of what the Attorney General was talking about. In 2010, I was a lieutenant with our Property Crimes Division. It was the first exposure I had to organized retail crime. We created an organized retail crime unit within the property crime section of APD back in the day, and it was the first time I attempted to get legislation done to combat organized retail crime. I want you to think about that. 12 years later, can anybody show us the legislation that the legislature has passed to help us combat retail crime? Very little, if any, at all. We have to update our system, and this is not about placing blame. This is not about placing blame on prosecutors. This is not about placing blame on judges. This is about a system that has limitations for every level, whether it's the limitations of law enforcement officers and how many we have, the limitation of prosecutors, what prosecutors are paid and how they can recruit them, or the tools that our judges are given that they have to work with that are mandated in a lot of ways. Every single process needs to be reviewed, and we need to look and see how we're going to fix it. A year ago, we came together at the AG's office to discuss organized retail crime, and we decided we were going to do something about it. 115 arrests is what we're looking at to date. Of those, 14 were alert offenders. Those are some of our most serious offenders that we have throughout the city. We recovered 3 handguns, 8 stolen vehicles, and more than $26,000 in property. There have been a total of 9 operations throughout the city, to include all of our malls, a lot of our big businesses such as Harbor Freight, Home Depot. Just last week, through one of our operations, a prolific offender, Kelly Shugart, who is facing 70 charges. Let me repeat that. 70 charges for burglary all over Albuquerque, was arrested. That alone shows the extent of the broken processes that we have throughout our criminal justice system. She remains in custody, and the DA's office is seeking preventative detention for her. Some of the people we have apprehended are Marcos Concepcion. He's accused of 36 shoplifting incidents totaling approximately $14,000. He's also being held for preventative detention as well. We also took Marvin Alderete and Ashley Roybal into custody for repeat shoplifting charges, armed robbery, receiving and transferring a stolen vehicle, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Both have been held for preventive detention. These are the types of individuals that we're looking at. But it begs the question, why do we want to focus on shoplifters? I've been at the Albuquerque Police Department a little over 25 years. And the one thing I will tell you is, time and time again, as I look at our repeat offenders, the very first charge I see in their escalation of their criminal career is what? Shoplifting. That's where so many of our criminals start, as simple shoplifters. And last night, we had an incident that's going to impact our city and impact a family forever that escalated to what we fear the most, the homicide of a beloved business owner within Albuquerque. And APD will continue to work hard to capture these individuals, make sure they face justice, but we shouldn't have to get to that point. We should already have some people in custody. We have to stop talking, the legislature needs to stop talking about being tough on crime. We actually have to get tough on crime. And sometimes it means we get our hands dirty, and yes, it means some people stay in jail. So later today, you'll be hearing more information about our offender from yesterday. How this individual was a case of an unsuccessful pretrial detention process. Yet yesterday, I read a story about how the courts were bragging about the success of that program. If that program is so successful, go explain it to the families that have lost loved ones to the failures of that program. It's time we start communicating, we start working together, and we start recognizing that the best place for some violent individuals who do not want to change their behavior is behind bars. We have to own that fact within the state of New Mexico and realize that we have to make some changes. We have to get people the help they need if they're substance abusers. We have to get them the mental health help they need if they have mental health problems. But when they are violent repeat offenders who refuse to change their actions, they need to sit in jail. Thank you.
Chief, before we go to we're going to transition to our chamber and our solution, our community solution, and our citizen. I do want to recognize Mr. Mendez of the DA's office. We are also placing a greater emphasis on successful prosecution, where the sentence has to match the crime. And Mr. Mendez, you want to come?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Adolfo Mendez. I'm the Chief of Policy and Planning for the District Attorney's Office here in Bernalillo County. I want to thank the Attorney General and thank the Mayor and the Chief for their comments. And what I want to do is I want to emphasize that this is the importance of this type of crime. It's a crime that is hidden within shoplifting, right? It's coordinated, sophisticated, but it is masked behind what it seems like a low-level crime of shoplifting. And we know that there's a threshold for shoplifting to become a felony. And guess who else knows that? The criminals in the community know that as well. And so there are changes that need to happen to the law to be able to pierce behind these hidden crimes and the complexity of the crimes and the seriousness of these crimes in our community. So the data efforts are important to be able to see those individuals who are otherwise would just show up as another shoplifting case. We need to understand that it's coordinated, sophisticated, and it needs this kind of partnership and concerted effort to unmask and address. The system is clearly broken, as you've heard from others speaking today. There's much to do, and this is an important partnership to help move that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez. So I'm going to transition, and I know that that it's important to be honest and truthful with how big of a problem this is, and most importantly, the crisis level that it's destroying and terrorizing families and wage workers throughout our community and throughout the state of New Mexico. However, I do want to commend our retailer community and our citizen community. They have been wonderful to work with. I want to recognize Home Depot, Kohl's, Safeway, Albertsons, Target, Walmart, and the Chamber of Commerce, because we are also building a community solution, and that's very unique in this country. And so now I'd like to bring up President Rob Black, who the Chamber has not sat idle. They unfortunately now are doing more than they should have to. But I want Mr. Black to come up and maybe talk about a solution that we've built in our community that will provide hopefully some real safety impact for our consumers and our families throughout the state.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Good morning. My name is Rob Black. I am the president and CEO of the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce, and we're very pleased to be here today in this, to announce this partnership with the Attorney General, district attorneys, and law enforcement, and retailers all over New Mexico in an effort to address the fast-growing problem of organized retail crime here in New Mexico and its impact that it's having on our communities, on our employees, and on our businesses. Our member companies came to the Chamber earlier this year asking for help. But they didn't just bring up a problem, they helped bring forward a solution. And we're very happy to be part of that solution at the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce. We're here today to announce the formation of the New Mexico Organized Retail Crime Association at the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce. As part of that program, we are providing a platform, an online digital platform that will around retail crime intelligence. It's a retail crime intelligence platform called Roar, and that will allow real-time reporting and sharing of actionable intelligence to law enforcement by retail businesses all over the state of New Mexico. Think about things like security footage, a cell phone picture of a suspect, a car license plate. That information can be uploaded by that retail partner into this platform, and law enforcement will have immediate access to that information. The platform will also allow law enforcement to connect the dots on repeat offenders around New Mexico. But it will also bridge those gaps between Arizona, Texas, Colorado, because the platform is not just in New Mexico, it's a national platform with over 20 other states who've stood up these organized retail crime associations. And this will allow law enforcement to look at someone who steals a $200 DeWalt drill at Home Depot, and then to see that they actually stole 3 flat screen TVs the day before in Rio Rancho at Walmart. And all of a sudden you start to see that pattern, you start to see the organization aspects of it, and that's the power of this platform. And by putting all this data in one place, what we're trying to do is frankly create a one-stop shopping center for our law enforcement and not for criminals. And so by doing this and creating this collaboration with law enforcement, we believe where our retail partners can upload security information, upload investigatory information, it will make law enforcement job much easier. Think about how much time it takes our police officers to go to every store that this is happening to, collect security footage, do all of that sort of work. Whereas we have working in a partnership can upload that information and they have real-time access to it. It's going to save their resources for other work and through that collaboration. The platform also uses artificial intelligence for predictive analysis based on patterns of when and where crimes are happening, what types of crimes are happening. It can also start to identify potential accomplices and tie those to those so that you can start to build an understanding of that criminal network. However, our online platform is only as good as the data that goes into it. So part of what we're here to do today is to ask our retailers around the state, ask our law enforcement around the state to participate in this program in the New Mexico Organized Retail Crime Association and sign up to participate in the Aurora platform. In order to do that, you can go to the New Mexico Chamber website. It's www.nmchamber.org/NMORCA. And there you can register. You have to be affiliated with a business or with law enforcement in order to register. And then you'll gain access to the platform. Again, I want to thank the Attorney General, District Attorney's Office, the Mayor, and our police departments for the partnership that we have today. We have a long way to go, as was expressed in the conversation this afternoon. We are committed at the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce to be part of that solution. We believe through conversations we've already had with the legislature, with the administration, that there's an opportunity for a bipartisan approach to this, to address this for all New Mexicans, because it is so impacting our community and our employees. And with that, I'd like to ask, if it's all right, sir, a colleague of ours, Mike Silva from Rude Boy Cookies, to join me at the podium Mike is an entrepreneur, businessman here in Albuquerque, and frankly, a leader in the community. And we wanted to give him a chance to share the impact this has had on his employees.
Oh, how's it going, everyone? I was not aware of the Giovanni's news until just now, and like many of you, like the mayor said, that was a comfort place for me and my family. I went to Wilson Middle School, which is right next door to Giovanni's. And as a middle school kid with not a lot of money, scrounging up $1.50 to get a slice of pizza, at Giovanni's was a treat. I'm devastated. I was just sitting there hearing that news, and it's completely derailed every thought that I had in my head. And unfortunately, that's all too common in our city at this point. I own a business at 1916 Central Avenue, Southeast, right across from the university, on Route 66, the most famous road in the entire world. And during daylight, about a month ago, someone pulled up into my parking lot, backed in, walked into my shop, wielded a gun, and 40 seconds later left with my money, leaving unbelievable amounts of trauma behind. My 19-year-old employee, who dealt with the brunt of that, is still devastated and rocked by it. My other employee was in the space but unaware of the occurrence. It was so quick. And to APD's credit, the officer arrived within minutes, with maybe even a minute. And by the time I arrived at the shop after my employees called me, he was already there taking care of my employee and gathering information. The crime is not unique to me or my business. Unfortunately, it's happened to too many of my friends in business. And as a small business owner, I'm not Costco, I'm not Home Depot, I'm not Lowe's, I'm not Walmart. I'm a small business owner where every single dollar matters. And when you're robbed, the impact is monumentally trickling. So now I have to take on additional expense of security. Now I have to take on, and the security companies are charging more than ever. So now I have to take on additional expenses of additional cameras. And all that comes on with trying to protect my staff, because as a business owner that employs 14 people in my space, the last thing I ever want to do is call a parent and relay the news of something as traumatic as what happened at Giovanni's. And so I take great responsibility in protecting my staff and keeping them as safe as possible. But we can only do so much. Bad guys are going to be bad guys, and they seem to be winning at this point. And so my challenge is not to any of the people standing up here behind me, because they're going to do what they're going to do. They're elected to do what they're going to do. My challenge is to everybody else sitting out here in these seats. What are you going to do? Are you going to go home when this is over and go have lunch? And then are you going to go sit in your house in the North Valley? And because the warmth of your success makes you okay, then everything else is okay? What are you going to do individually? Are you going to do anything to try to impact change in our community? That's my challenge to every single one of the people in this room. 2 or 3 years from now, the people up here will be different. It'll be somebody else standing here, probably saying something very similar. And 10 years ago, somebody else stood up here and probably said something very similar. And it's worse now. Nothing's better. My other business drives all across the city, showing off our amazing city to tourists from all over the world. who chose to come to Albuquerque because they want to see our city. And we show them Albuquerque every single day. We talk about how amazing it is. We talk about the architecture and the pop culture and the movies and the university and all of that. But you know who our most difficult challenges with that business? The locals. It's not the tourist. It's the locals. It's us. We're our own worst enemy. So my challenge to any of you that are sitting in here that give a damn is to get off your ass and do anything. We're 2 degrees apart in this city. We all know everybody. If it could happen at Giovanni's, a neighborhood pizza place that we've all probably stepped into, what's to say it doesn't happen to someone that you know and you care about and you love? Because you went home and you turned on your 75-inch TV and you chilled out. And you didn't worry about it. You didn't know that your neighbor was next door to you, hemorrhaging, dying, suffering. Because we don't care. Because we don't check on our fellow human. Because we've made it. We're good. I don't need to worry about it. It's not my problem. It's our problem. Obviously, they can't do it alone. They can create as many programs as they want. It doesn't matter unless we engage and we get others to engage. Nothing's going to change. We're going to keep burying prominent business people. We're going to keep burying kids, children. These two. What could we have done maybe sooner to prevent them from becoming that? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but it starts with us, not them, in my humble opinion. I was robbed. They took very little money. I'm not going to get any of it back. The insurance isn't going to do me any good. My employees are rattled. My business is shaken. I'm on the verge of closure because it's hard to be in business in this day and age. And now I have to deal with additional expenses. That's the impact on a small business. But you know what? I'll be okay. I'll build another business if I have to. What I care more about is our community is in shambles. Our city is a train wreck right now because not enough people will get off their butts and do something beyond themselves. That's my challenge. That's my ask.
Thank you, Mayor. We can now go to questions.
I have a question for Chief Medina. Chief, for years we've been hearing from APD in the city that property crime in Albuquerque is down, but violent crime is up. Recently, I myself have done story after story after story, tattoo shops, auto shops, beauty salons, you name it, they've all been robbed, they've all been burglarized, they've all been vandalized. Are we seeing a change in that trend, or are people just not reporting it anymore?
You know, one of the crimes I look at is it's very difficult not to report a stolen motor vehicle because the vehicle has to be entered into NCIC, and there's always that fear that there's some crimes that are going unreported. We still are seeing property crimes as a whole dropping throughout the community, including auto theft, residential burglaries, state flat. I think we're down 1%. But the thing we are seeing is we are seeing the increased violence, and we are seeing an increase in robberies. And we talked about it earlier this year that, you know, through the DA's office, the Attorney General, we're now charging some of these individuals where in the past they were charged with shoplifting, they're now charged with robbery. So we are still seeing positive trends in terms of property crimes. We're seeing positive trends in terms of traffic fatalities. But we are struggling as a community with gun violence and individuals that are using weapons and the threat of violence to rob others and sometimes kill them. But you know, the one thing I do want to point out is I think Sergeant Olquist is here. We're talking about an operation with over 100 arrests, with a police department that, without a doubt, we're the first to own it. We have limited resources, and Sergeant Olquist, behind every successful operation is a successful leader. And Sergeant Olquist, I just would like you to step in here real quick to say thank you from all of us up here for all the work that you and your people put into this process. to get people into custody that need to be in custody. So this is the success, is her unit and the work that they're doing. And we need to get our officers the support they need. And that's where we need our state legislature to look at how hard our officers are working. And when they talk about supporting police, which I see in every political ad, this is how you support police. Give them the tools they need to stop arresting the same people over and over and over again. So, Sergeant, thank you for all of your hard work from your unit.
Oh, I have one other question for you, Chief.
No, just bring it.
Right back there. You had mentioned that the suspect in the homicide from last night at Giovanni's was, if I remember correctly, I think you said it was an example of the pretrial detention, a failure in that system. Can you expand on that?
You know, we'll be putting out some more information later today, reference that, but this is an individual who was in the process of that process, so to speak.
And then, I have a question for Mayor Keller as well.
Sure.
Mayor, what's your response to these property owners, these business owners who, quite frankly, are fed up, they're tired, they are saying they can't even afford to stay open anymore? What do you say to them tonight?
Well, I say first, I would listen to two people who spoke today. The head of the chamber, who has proactive ways in which you can try and reduce what's happening, and also to Mike Silva. You know, at the end of the day, we've got to look to each other to deal with this, not just to someone else, whether it's APD or a particular officer. These problems are too big. And part of it is taking responsibility in ways that we can. And one way that they can is participating in the chamber program. So, you know, we can even get it down to a point where, like, have you done these 5 things to help the community, including talk to your neighbor businesses? You know, we might have to sort of put together that sort of checklist for crime fighting responsibility. And some of it, a lot of it, is obviously on us. But when you think about, you know, at some point, how many times are we rearresting the same person? You know, how many times are we not even doing things on the front end to prevent these folks from going into drug trafficking and addiction in the first place? We are, in many ways, all of us have a piece in which we can play in that. And you got to understand that. You know, we are all frustrated, like I think in America and in New Mexico and in Albuquerque. All of us. But we've got to channel that into action that we can use. And so I do think we're demonstrating with these 100 arrests that we take this seriously. So don't say we don't take it seriously, because we do. We absolutely do. And it also shows that we are being effective to the tune of 100 people who are no longer doing shoplifting. But it also says that we've got to do more, and we have to work together in that. We can't just sit there and complain.
And I have a follow-up for you. In terms of the property crime, I'm hearing from business owners that if we looked at minor crimes like loitering or open drug use and focused on making those arrests, that their businesses in turn would be a little bit safer. Is there any plan to maybe shift and have APD focus on making those minor arrests as well?
So I think it's important to just debunk some myths. We already do that. And so we enforce every law that is appropriate whenever we're there. So there is no situation where we don't do that unless we don't have the resources. And, you know, the issue is you try and explain, you know, the value of officers responding to violent crime versus us not doing that and lives being lost versus the inconvenience of someone being outside your street for a half a day. We have to make tough choices. And I will save a life every time before I will deal with someone who's inconveniencing you. That's just the reality we're in. It is a myth. It's a fantasy to think that somehow a chief could just say, well, we're going to start enforcing small level crime. That's a complete myth. So we have to do better, and we have to actually point to real answers, not sound bites that we heard one day about how we should enforce loitering laws. So, do you want to add anything on that?
You know, and I think it's important to add on the fact that our officers work hard every day. If you look, most of our field officers come into calls holding. They leave at the end of the day call holding. A lot of them don't even get a lunch break during the 12-hour shifts. They're working 12-hour shifts. There are a lot of misdemeanor crimes that occur every day, and I wish we had 2,000 officers that we could dispatch to every single trespassing and get that dealt with. But the bottom line is we don't. And part of the Metro Crime Initiative on things that we're working on is not sometimes bringing civilians to take some of the tasks away from our sworn individuals, but one of our goals of our Metro Crime Initiative this round is how do we speed up the booking process for our officers so it doesn't take them so long to get somebody booked and to get them through medical and everything else. We have to become efficient as a police department with the limited resources that we have, and the Metro Crime Initiative is the answer. How are we going to work with individual partners to find answers to some of the questions that we're facing that could make us quicker and better at being able to do the job that we need to do?
I just want to add, and I know we're headed, because I don't want this point to be lost. The legislature has failed to proportionally fund a safety net that is reasonably responding to the level of crime that we're just talking about. I've assessed it. We have thousands of officers. We need a wholesale 10% increase in funding tomorrow. And any elected official who does not vote for a 10% law enforcement increase is failing to address organized retail crime throughout the state of New Mexico. And here's why specifically. Number one, what we're learning is that we're talking about APD. This criminal will go up to Rio Rancho in real time. And we have to have data sharing. So what we've built in this task force is a model which we're asking the legislature to permanently fund, in which we have special agents at respective law enforcement agencies throughout the state of New Mexico working with prosecutors and special prosecutors across the state. I have one agent and one special prosecutor that I funded myself. Let me be clear, the legislature has not thrown $1 to the Attorney General's unit on organized retail crime, and yet we're leading a task force and we're having profound results in sending some of these individuals to prison because we are going after them. 10% of the most violent organized retail criminals are committing 70% of the violence, theft, and terrorism. And so I'm trying to present a funding formula here as well that's part of the reform and part of the failure of the narrative we're just hearing now. It cannot be on one law enforcement department or one DA's office alone. These are special units that I'm proposing to create permanent units in each region that can share information and can basically pursue criminals through multiple jurisdictions. This is why they made a complete joke out of committing crime in Valencia County, Sandoval County, Bernalillo County, and then just tying up these DA systems. So I just want to be very clear on that we are requesting as the task force a proportional increase in these special units so that we can create this as a permanent solution. Go ahead.
Do you have a dollar amount for that funding that you're seeking?
10%. So we have a proportional licensed officers now, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 officers. It's a $1 billion problem. All I'm suggesting is 10%, which could be in the tens of millions, but peanuts and pennies compared to the tragedy and the cost that is costing our economy.
I have a question for Mayor Tim Keller. A lot of the discussion today has been talked about, a lack of resources. And I think you guys have shown ways that we're working smarter and not harder. But a big goal of Mayor Keller's when taking office was we wanted to bolster the ranks of the Albuquerque Police Department. You've met the goal of hiring 100 officers every year, but we have fewer officers than we do right now than we did a year ago, and we barely have more officers than we did when we first took office. What are we doing to not only recruit, but also retain officers, and is that something that we have the power to do at the city level that we don't need help from the state to accomplish that goal?
Well, I appreciate your background on that, just because it's correct in a sense that we did get 100 new, so the issue is retention. So I think first and foremost, there's two issues that have come to light with the Metro Crime Initiative. Yes, we wish we had more officers so that we actually could enforce all the things we want to enforce. That's true. But we need funding in the parole offices. We need funding in the courts to process these cases. We need funding at the DA's office so that they can have faster prosecution. So what we've now acknowledged is that you want to actually help out Albuquerque because we can't retain the amount of officers that we need to. Fund the rest of the criminal justice system, including the AG. Fund the judges. How about 3 extra judges in the metro? That would be amazing. So that's actually how you can help us, is to make sure the rest of the system has the funding. Because ironically, we do have the funding. That's not our issue. But the rest of the system is screaming for funding. What I have done is made sure that our police department has every dollar they need. And that has been true from day one in my administration. And with respect to compensation for officers. So none of them are leaving because they're getting a higher paid job elsewhere in New Mexico in law enforcement. So I've owned that part of this problem, and I think we've done quite well on that. And it's obviously an investment of taxpayer dollars. I need the state of New Mexico, Bernalillo County, and every government entity in between to also get that kind of funding to support APD. Now, with respect to directly on retention, we do have some programs in the works, so I would say stay tuned. In September, I think we're going to have some very positive announcements in that regards. We're not ready yet. Also, the climate for our officers, no one wants to stay in law enforcement anymore. So when we can support them, whether it's thanking them for their service, whether it's giving them a little bit of leeway when it comes to doing an investigation, whether it's appreciating them for getting the 100 arrests that we have, that matters to them. That's why they're in the job. And that's why when we hate on police officers, we have a lot more police officers leaving the department. That's true all across America.
Ryan, thanks for the question. I think it's a great question because we have to recognize that, we have been very successful at recruiting. We are one of the few departments our size around the country that's actually, since 2018, added officers. But we haven't been able to add what we want. And we know we want to grow at least to 1140. And I think one of the things we have to remember is we can't forget that 2020 occurred and that there was a lot of movements towards defunding the police, and there are a lot of things that were done across the country which really impacted our profession. And we're making our way out of it through strong community relations, showing and proving ourselves to the community that we're transparent, we're honest, and we're and that we can be trusted. But I think that if you look at it nationally, that's the narrative that's occurred nationally and something that's happening. But then when you look at it locally, and you look at our officers are the best paid officers in the state of New Mexico, like the mayor said, they're not leaving APD because they're going to go somewhere else and make more money. They're leaving APD because a lot of the younger officers that we're seeing are leaving the profession for a variety of reasons. And locally, what have we done to help prevent this is, number one is, this administration stood up to the Department of Justice and our settlement agreement, and we got that moving forward. We held our people accountable, but we also held everybody in the process accountable, and we're taking great strides to get out of that process right now. And we've paid our officers great, and we've made modifications where community policing is a priority, and we pay officers to stay within the same area command. We've brought them almost $60 million in technology, or probably even higher. I'm probably off on that. Somebody will correct me later. But we've brought more technology to this department than before, equipment than ever before. But we also have a problem at the state level, and we need our legislators to once again listen to us. We have a lot of officers retire at 20 years. They could work till 25-6 and get 90%, but the state needs to add incentives in there for people to maximize their para time. And we have a lot of ideas that we're presenting to our legislatures, and I hope they take to them and they listen to them. One of the disappointing things is last year we had 100% retirement for our officers lose by 2 votes on one Saturday, which would have increased the ability of people to stay longer in their career. We have to take advantage of year 20 and maximize it at year 28-3, and we have to find ways to keep people 8 more years, and we can't do it without the state legislature. And the state legislature also has to look at good, sustainable ways to hold officers accountable, because we should be held accountable. But the impacts that were created when they passed the loss of qualified immunity and how officers felt unsupported in that also impacted officers who have left APD to other agencies outside of the state of New Mexico. And I've said this over and over. I'd be very concerned if I had APD officers in mass drones leaving to agencies within Albuquerque, BCSO, state police, other agencies. We've lost people to those agencies generally under a dark cloud. But we are losing young officers to other states who their legislature has supported their officers, and they have not gone in those directions of losing some of those rights that our officers need so badly, and the support that the messaging in that sends.
I'm sorry,
How many more
We're out of
questions?
time. You wanna take
I
one more?
want 2 more questions.
To whoever wants to answer this up there, but how do you reassure businesses and business owners that at the end of the day they're gonna be okay? I can't tell you the amount of times I've interviewed Mr. Silva about his business being robbed. I can't tell you the amount of times I've been down Central or in Knott Hill and talking to these business owners who are terrified to lock up their business or they're closing hours early. So how can you reassure businesses that they're gonna be okay, that this initiative is gonna work, that we won't have Mr. Silva back here in 3 years with the exact same tweet we have today?
Everybody up here can't give Mr. Silva that reassurance. And I think Mr. Silva was very clear in saying that it takes everybody. We need the courts to work with us. We need prosecutors to work with us. We need the city of Albuquerque, all cities within the state of New Mexico. This is a group project that needs every single investor in safety to work together. This is not something that I can do. And I wish I could sit here and lie to the community and say, hey, we're going to have officers present and you're going to feel safe. The reality is there'll never, ever be enough officers to put them in front of every single business that closes at 12 at night. There will never be enough officers to put them on every dangerous street corner where we know drug dealing and homicides are occurring. We just won't. We need the community to work together. We need to make changes to our system, and we need to make sure that individuals who go down that path of hurting others know that there are true consequences, and those consequences sometimes will be a life behind bars. And on other angles, we got to make sure that our substance abuse programs are fully funded, that people who are struggling with drug addiction and are stealing to support that drug addiction get the help they need. And this can only be accomplished with everybody working together.
And I want to just add,
That's a great question, Sasha. So let me reiterate. You've heard 2 models spoken about today, a reactive model where an officer of APD is responding to a business owner, and a proactive model that I'm asking for permanent funding. I can't tell you how many customers have come up to me, the Attorney General on street clothes, thanking me when they see an operation of deployment. Some of you reporters have been on a ride along with us. We literally are going out after these violent offenders during the day while they're committing those criminal acts. And so you have 2 models, an old law enforcement model where they're trying to police other crimes being called after a crime's been committed. And then there's an operational task force where we literally are going on a Thursday, a Sunday, and customers relieved, sharing anecdotes, just saying thank you. Didn't want to see you rounding up criminals that are felons in a Home Depot parking lot. But it is reassuring. And what is tragic is when we're finding out that these are stolen cars, guns, cash in those cars. And what I'm asking for is a permanent funding solution so that those operations are ongoing every week. That's the only way that I think customers and business owners will develop some type of confidence. But that anecdote has been very powerful when they literally see plainclothes officers stopping crime while it's occurring in a Walmart or in a retail center. So one more question.
If I could
Yeah.
move very quickly just on that. I think Mr. Silva gave us an admonition to get involved. It's an opportunity for our business owners, our community leaders to get involved. This is a tough conversation today. But we have a place, we're trying to build a place, a collaborative place, with law enforcement, with businesses around the state, to give people a way to make a difference in their own communities. So again, the platform we're standing up at the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce is free to any business to participate. We want you involved. We want you to participate. That's how we can empower our law enforcement directly. The Attorney General has mentioned many other ways we can do that as well, as a community and as a chamber, and we're on board. But I think there's also, each of us need to take responsibility to take the steps we can to get involved. And today we are announcing an amazing collaborative tool with law enforcement that our businesses can participate in to help secure their own space.
one final question.
This is either for Mayor Keller or Chief Medina. In a release sent out by APD this morning about the Giovanni's homicide last night, it stated that the suspect in question, was loitering at Giovanni's when this took place. So back to my original question, if we, said keep it moving, kind of controlled that a little bit more could this violent crime have been prevented altogether?
There's a difference between loitering and pulling out a gun.
Yeah, there's
Go
a
ahead.
huge difference between loitering and pulling out a gun. And the one thing is this is that balancing act. You know, we try to get officers out as soon as possible to any of these locations when they do call those in. And if we tied up all our officers with the loitering, next week the media would be doing a story about how we've shifted resources to loitering and homicides are out of control. Or I think that did occur last year. And there, we have to remember that it is a difficult balancing act for us all, and that we devote resources where they're most appropriate. And our goal has always been the same. It's working on the most violent individuals and trying to take them into custody to prevent these types of tragedies. So we will continue to dispatch officers the way we can. We know that that is one place where we lack the resources. I wish we could get to every call as quickly as possible, but the truth is our calls hold, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. We're planning to talk about, you know, our ability to get out to calls. And I would, like I said, wish I had, and I could say that every single call could be responded to in a quick, reasonable time. But the fact of the reality is that's not where we're at as a law enforcement agency.
Appreciate it.